What's happening, guys? P back with you for an all-new edition of the Music Box P podcast. Hope you guys had a great Labor Day weekend. Summer's unfortunately almost come to an end. I know we still got a couple more weeks ahead, but then the fall's coming around. But anyway, hope you're able to enjoy the last bit of summer. So on today's episode, with 9/11, the anniversary of 9/11 coming up on Thursday, the 23rd anniversary, I thought we'd go back down memory lane and take a look at the 9/11 band songs list. So this is something I've been willing to talk about for so long because it's one of the more sore spots in music history about. So I mean, long story short, after 9/11, there were songs that were considered insensitive, and that a radio station, namely Clear Channel, thought it'd be insensitive to play on the radio. So it wasn't more of an order, but it was more like a request or a suggestion of not to play these songs. But it came out back then. A lot of radio stations didn't even bother with the list, and I'm sure some played it, some adhered to the list, which wasn't even an order. A lot of times radio station programmers ignore those types of memos that come from upper management or from corporate for that matter. But I thought in today's episode we go over the list and just look over some of the most ridiculous entries. It's one of the more things of talking about censorship and all that, about trying to tell people what you can play and what you can. And so it was it was just one of the most unbelievable things I ever heard or read in my life. And it's just one of those things where you're like, did this really happen? And I'm like, yeah, it did. I mean, to have a big radio conglomerate or behemoth actually issue this memo, which a lot of times gets thrown in the trash, but that's what happened. So following the 9/11 attacks, so Clear Channel, which is now known as iHeartMedia, sent out a memo to all their radio stations that it contained a list of songs that program directors felt were lyrically questionable play after the 9/11 attacks. So, of course, after 9/11 happened, many TV and radio stations altered the normal programming to go to news coverage and all that. Um, but it was sort of a rumor because, Clear Channel never admitted that they actually sent out the list. And that was one of the more odd things, too. So, Clear Channel went into eminent denial about the whole thing. But what they said, or what people sort of figured out, was that the list wasn't explicit demand to not play the songs, but rather a suggestion that they don't want to play these songs. So it wasn't really an order. It was more like a request. So Hits Daily Double, which is an independent music newsletter that I used to read all the time, not so much anymore, but I used to read it religiously back in the day. They actually released the list, and they did. Other sites did research on it, and they concluded that the list did exist as a suggestion for radio stations, but it was not an outright ban on the songs in question. And so this got a lot of attention in the press, and it got subject to news stories and all that too. So basically, so the list has about 165 songs. I actually saved it on my saved in my documents folder as a Word document to actually have the list. So we're pretty much going to look through the whole list right now, and some of the more ridiculous entries. Some are more obvious and kind of understandable, and some are sort of a double standard and whatnot. So there's 165 songs on there. One prominent thing was every song in Rage Against the Machine's catalog, which is about 49 songs total, which, of course, they have a lot of political leans. It's kind of understanding where you put that in, but and it's also covers of certain songs. Um, and what was kind of an odd thing, they would put so Bob Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Door and then the cover by Guns N' Roses, those songs were both banned on the list. So both the original and the cover version. But for some odd reason, only certain covers were included in the list. So I'm sure you all remember Alien Ant Farm's cover of Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal. So that song was included in 9/11 band songs list, but the original Michael Jackson recording was not, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And could it be that a lot of radio stations were playing the Alien Ant Farm version because it was more current and they weren't playing the original MJ version? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but there's sort of that double standard there that, if it's the same song with the same lyrics and just a different person playing it, why are you being one but keeping another? It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's also the same version of Martha Vandel's original version of Dance in the Street. Um, it was sort of, so Martha Vandel's originally did the version, Van Halen did a cover on it, but David Bowie and Mick Jagger, they did a cover, but that song was not included on the list. So it really is just one of the more ridiculous things that I've ever heard of. And also, like, some songs that are considered like joyful or sort of, to take you away, and that was more uplifting, like Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. That was banned on the list because it said playing, Clear Channel believed that playing joyful music in the aftermath of the attacks was inappropriate. I mean, come on. I mean, if that's not censorship, I don't know what is, but it's one of the more ridiculous things. So, how Clear Channel came up with the list is sort of any songs that talked about like airplanes, collisions, death, conflict, violence, explosions, anything to do with the month of September, Tuesday, which is the day of the week when the attacks occurred, anything involving New York City, and anything that any aspects of the attacks like Middle East, sky falling, weapons, it was just it was really was unbelievable. And also there was a radio. I was reading like some things that happened after that. So a station in Washington D.C. at WASH, they played "Cool in the Game" Celebration. This is while the memo was being circulated to all the stations, and a caller actually called the station. And just sort of why are you playing the song? And then the station said, "Oh no, it was a mistake." So one of the more like ridiculous things like in history that like that had to be done. But it is what it is, and, yes, it did happen. It's just so ridiculous, and it just complete censorship, and I don't understand why it happened. Because after the 9/11 attacks, music was my only source of to get away from it all. Because I was 16 when it happened. I was just about to start my junior year of high school, and the attacks happened, and then I I, I distinctly remember MTV. They kept on. I was at school at the time. I was looking at old videotapes of what happened. So when the attacks happened a little before 9 a.m., I think it was quarter of nine on that Tuesday. MTV was still playing music videos, and they kept on playing music videos while the attacks were going. After the second plane hit, after the towers fall, after the Pentagon got hit, all the other stations had switched over to news coverage. MTV still played music videos up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they switched to CBS News coverage. So MTV is a little behind the ball, and I think they wanted to like keep the music on in case people were home or that sort of thing. So MTV simulcast CBS News coverage up until 11 o'clock at night, and then they brought the music back, but it was in a more uplifting spirit. So they played more uplifting music after that time. So let's go over the 9/11 band songs list and just go over songs are on it. So Three Doors Down, Duck and Run, 311's Down. I don't understand. I absolutely adore that song. I don't know why it's on there. Just again, it has to do with the title of the song. Several songs by AC/DC, Shot Down in Flames, Shoot to Thrill, Dirty Deeds, Highway to Hell, Safe in New York City, TNT, and Hell's Bills. Alanis Morissette's Ironic. Don't know why that's on there. It makes no bloody sense. Four songs from Alice in Chains, Rooster, Sea of Sorrow, Down in a Hole, and Them Bones. And then, of course, talk about Alien Farm, Smooth Criminal. The Animals, We Gotta Get Out of This Place. Bangles, Walk Like an Egyptian. Obviously, the terrorists were from Egyptian descent. So, Bare Naked Ladies, Falling for the First Time. Barry Maguire, Eva Destruction. Beastie Boys, Sure Shot, and Sabotage. Four songs of the Beatles are on here. I don't know why this was. So, Day in the Life, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Ticket to Ride, and Obla Di Obla Da. So, I mean, you can sort of figure that out. I guess the ticket because an airplane ticket, but oh god. Billy Joel, Only the Good Die Young, kind of understandable there. Black Sabbath, War Pigs, and Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Let's see what else. We talked about Bob Dylan, Guns N' Roses. Bobby Darin, Mac the Knife. Three songs from Bruce Springsteen. I'm on Fire, Going Down in War. Bush, Speak Hills. So the interesting story about this song. It was just before 9/11. I looked over the Modern Rock Tracks list. Of course, it was their album I think came out a little bit after 9/11. Like the first single from that album was called Speak Hills, but after the 9/11 attacks, they changed the title to The People That We Love, which Bush got from the a lyric in that song. So they switched the song title to Speak Hills, The People We Love. Kind of understandable. Carole King's I Feel the Earth Move. Two songs from Cat Stevens, Peace Train and Morning Has Broken. Don't know why that's on there. I guess because he's of Arab descent, because he switched to Islam. I don't know if that had something to do with it. I have no idea. Child Lights, Have You Seen Her? I don't know why that's on there. Oh god. The Clash, Rock the Casbah, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Traveling Band, Dave Matthews Band, Crash Into Me. Um, Don McLean, American Pie. I have no idea why that's on there. Drowning Pool Bodies. That's kind of understandable because that was a huge hit in the summer of 2001. Huge, and the song more had to do with like bodies move around the mosh pit, but after 9/11, just it was kind of insensitive because of the people that were jumping out of the World Trade Center to escape from the fire and whatnot. So it's kind of understandable. Edwin Starr's War. Three songs from Elton John: Benny and the Jets, Daniel, and Rocket Man. Elvis Presley, You're the Devil in Disguise. Everclear's Santa Monica. Probably has to do with the lyricism in that. Foo Fighters, Learn to Fly. Frank Sinatra, New York, New York. Fuel's Bad Day. I know that was a newer song around that time. Godsmack, Bad Religion. Green Day, Brain Stew. I'm not going to read the whole song, but just some highlights from the list. So, James Taylor, Fire and Rain. Jimi Hendrix, Hey Joe. John Lennon's Imagine. You would figure that's one of the most uplifting songs, but probably because the song was too sad. I'm going to have more comments on this later on, but John Parr's St. Elmo's Fire. Kansas, Dust in the Wind. Korn, Falling Away From Me. Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. Lenny Kravitz, Fly Away. We talked about Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. Leonard Skinner, Tuesday's Gone. Obviously, the attacks occurred on Tuesday. We talked about Martha Vandel's couple songs from Megadeth, Dread and the Fugitive, Sweating Bullets. Four songs from Metallica, Seek and Destroy, Harvester or Sorrow, Enter Sandman, Fade to Black. Neil Diamond's America. I mean, a song about patriotism is on here. I mean, go figure. Ozzy Osbourne's Suicide Solution. A couple songs from Pat Benatar, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, Love Is a Battlefield. Paul McCartney Wings, Live and Let Die. Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight. A couple songs for Pink Floyd, Run Like Hell and Mother. P.O.D.'s Boom, which of course, the thing about P.O.D. also, it is sort of an odd thing. Alive was the first single released from the album. I think it came out in July, August of 2001. And the Satellite album, the album which it came from, came out on September 11th. So it was sort of just this odd coincidence. Boom wasn't released a single to radio till like I think April of 2002. So Live was the first single, but Boom was a single released later. But it was many months after 9/11 attacks, and this list was kind of relaxed after not a lot of radio stations pay much attention to it anyway. So Queen's another one, Bites the Dust, and Killer Queen. Again, we talked about all the Rage Against the Machine songs. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Aeroplane, and Under the Bridge. REM's It's the End of the World as We Know It. Rolling Stones' Ruby Tuesday. Again, that's not what the song was about. It was just, it was a song. My God. Savage Garden, Crash and Burn. A couple songs from Slipknot, Left Behind, Wait and Bleed. Smashing Pumpkins, Bullet with Butterfly Wings. Stone Temple Pilots, Big Bang Baby, Dead and Bloated. Three songs from Soundgarden, Blow Up the Outside World, Fell in Black Days and Black Hole Sun. Sugar Ray's Fly, System of a Down, Chop Suey, kind of understandable with that one. Talking Heads, Burning Down the House. Third Eye Blind, Jumper. Tom Petty, Free Falling. U2, Sunday Bloody Sunday. Of course, we talked about Van Halen. They also had Dancing in the Street and Jump. So that's the list in a nutshell. And you can Google the full list and get the full list with all the songs on it. But I just felt the song was just completely ridiculous in its own right. It was censorship at its finest, and I think Clear Channel really didn't know its ass from its elbow. So that they figured they put out this. It was sort of like a trial balloon of sorts. Let's put this list out there and just see if people pay much attention to it. And I'm sure, again, as I said, you got media coverage and all that, and just the whole thing was absolutely utterly ridiculous. I mean, a lot of those songs that I played, just whether I burned it on CD or listened to it, from songs I downloaded on Napster and played it in the aftermath of 9/11, music was the only thing getting people through such an awful time in American history. And I think it was an awful time, and music was the only respite to get away from all the news coverage. Because I think when it happened on a Tuesday, I think by Friday or Saturday, we're just willing to get on with our lives and just go out and just. I know I was, because I was running cross country at the time, and just when 9/11 attacks happened on that Tuesday, everything sort of continued, as normal. We were just. I had cross country practice after school, each day that after school, and then on the weekend, and it was really just one of those serene things. Like, let's just get on with our lives and not let current events sort of dictate how we live. And that was sort of how I looked at it. And I think a lot of other people would agree with me on that front. I just think, looking over this list in general, it was just such a ridiculous exercise of censorship at its finest. Because, yeah, I mean, some songs we, kind of understand what, like drowning pools, bodies, and whatnot too. But to have sort of the double standards I talked about with Alien Ant Farm, Smooth Criminal on the band list, but Michael Jackson's wasn't, even though it's essentially the same song. You really have to like go figure. And I think another one too that wasn't on the list, but it was so blatantly obvious because the band that came out around that time was Jimmy Eat World. So, Bleed American was the title track from the album. It was the first single released from the album. The album came out in July 2001, and Bleed American was climbing up the Modern Rock Tracks list. So, on the just before the 9/11 attacks, so for the weekend in September 8th, Bleed American climbed up from 24 to 22 on Modern Rock Tracks set. So after the 9/11 attacks, it didn't climb much higher. I think it went up a few more spots. Then it gradually declined in position. My guess is because of Bleed and American in the title, radio stations kind of phased it out of rotation. Then the middle got played more often, which of course was Jimmy World's huge breakout hit. And also I remember like after 9/11 happened, Bleed American, the title of the album was prominently featured on the cover art. But after 9/11, they started making more pressings of the album without Bleed American in the title. It was just simply called Jimmy Eat World. It was simply a self-titled album. But gradually, after more pressings in 2002 and so thereafter, they restored the Bleed American title. Now, whether the band had something to do with that or that was more of a corporate thing, I don't know. It's not my place to suggest. It was more, I think, a cultural sensitivity to the whole thing too, which I think is so utterly ridiculous because that's not what the song was about. It was just, people overreacting, just saying you shouldn't put, these things to have anything to do because I just thought it so completely and utterly ridiculous. So, um, but I think seeing the songs that were on the list before 9/11, of course, The Callings, Wherever You Will Go, that peaked at number 14. It was actually a huge hit on modern rock radio before it crossed over to top 40 radio later the fall after 9/11. It was one of the biggest adult contemporary hits of the 2000s, actually, too. It was one of the top songs, and just it provided, some comfort, in the intervening days after 9/11, too. So, um, and some other songs that were on the list too. But of course, seeing the modern rock tracks list, it's a great time to sort of go back in time and see what was going on at that time, live sort of before and after 9/11. Because I think what happened after 9/11 is that, and I think every one of you would agree with me on this, is that we lost some of our innocence as a culture. It was sort of lost that sort of idyllic sense of freedom and comfort, and we weren't as safe as we once thought we were. After 9/11, we sort of came to the conclusion that we needed to be like more around each other, our friends and family, and sort of music was the only thing that was keeping us going after that. So, of course, then in the first chart after 9/11, Incubus's Wish You Were Here was climbing up the charts. And you can see some of the other songs. Weezer's Island in the Sun, Stain's Fade was climbing up the list. Afro Man's Because I Got High. That was a big novelty song for all the 420 users out there. Lipsticks and Bruises, which of course, most people think of Lit as a one-hit wonder band, was My Own Worst Enemy, but Lipsticks and Bruises was actually a pretty solid song. We talked about Jimmy World's Bleed American. Linkin Park's In the End. That was huge, in 01 too. And of course, Hybrid Theory came out the year before, so it was great to see the songs after that still get radio airplay almost a year after the album was released. P.O.D. is Alive, which is a huge uplifting anthem after 9/11. Everybody gravitated towards that song. That song flew up the charts, went to number one. Then some of the other songs, of course, U2's Stuck in a Moment Can't Get Out. You Can't Get Out of. That was a huge hit after. Of course, they played in the Super Bowl with the one the Patriots are in, played the halftime show, and after that. So, it's sort of one of the more interesting things too, but just how I look at the list, it's so utterly ridiculous. People played whatever songs they wanted to after that point. So you could sort of look at the list from, different perspectives, and I think, everybody would have an opinion on that particular one. So I think just sort of, I just sort of look at the list and say, like, it is what it is. Most people, never take, these memorandums and just toss them in the trash from like corporate. Anything to do with corporate is just, people who think they have your best interests at heart, but they really don't. That's how I sort of look at it from the get-go. I just sort of, look at, life after 9/11 sort of through a different lens right now. And sort of the way music is right now, because sort of alternative, like what is alternative? I sort of come to that conclusion in so many different ways, and I think you could sort of interpret it in one fashion and the other. But I think, right now, music is just sort of, it's evolved into this sort of, it's different, it represents different subsets right now. So I think just sort of, 23 years or 24 years removed from the 9/11 attacks now, and just seeing like where we are as a society. Of course, everything's so polarizing now, we're so divided politically and whatnot too. Music is sort of, the ultimate distraction, and just sort of us to get away from the doldrums of the everyday life we live in, trying to get away from work, school, current events, anything that's going on in the world. Music sort of provides that ultimate comfort. And I think we look at songs just sort of in the moments and the comfort and care it provides us. So irregardless of lyricism, the title, and just the content of the song too, we look to it from all those songs. I think just sort of play all those songs, and I should put this like an Apple Music playlist. Just play all those songs, just in spite of what other people tell, and just sort of thumb your nose at everybody. Just sort of it's us that listen to the songs, not corporate. Okay. Corporate just is out to make money and all this other stuff. And Clear Channel, which of course, I heart, or I call them I Heartless, I Heartless Radio. Um, it was just, this is one episode I've been dying to make for some time. So it's a kind of a cool, it provides some good talking points as well too. And I just think it's great. But I'm sure everybody will have an opinion on this too. But to close this out, we're gonna play one song that sort of provide the ultimate comfort. P.O.D. is Alive. I remember I was a huge P.O.D. fan back in the day, and to have this song played, and of course MTV played the hell out of the video in the days after 9/11, so it provided just the ultimate comfort, and just the whole album in general, because of course it came out on September 11th, uh, coincidentally and oddly enough. So it provided that ultimate comfort, and just sort of meant to be an anthem that was bigger than it actually is, and it provided something that a lot of people gravitated toward, just in lyricism and comfort. It just provided people a way to escape, and for people in general, just get on with their lives. So here's P.O.D.'s Alive, closing us out on today's edition of the Music Box P podcast. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Catch you next week.